We're going to go into the home page to begin with. And I first want to talk about the content of this home page itself. On the home page here, you can see that I have a number of different sections of content. I really kind of recommend making home pages in pretty much the same way on a lot of the sites that I end up building. And so I've broken down this format that I use. To start with, I like to introduce people to my website, what my content on the site is going to be about, and essentially what the overall purpose of this site really is going to be. I kind of limit this to just a couple of paragraphs worth of content. The reason why I don't put too horribly much content up at the top is because the parts that are coming next, these next two sections here, this one and also this one, are for the primary categories that I'm going to be covering on my site. And so I want people to be able to see these easily when they first land on my web page. Because ultimately I want them to proceed on through my site through one of these two sections if they do come to my site through my homepage. So with that said, these two sections here I have described below. One is the info category intro, and the other is the product category intro. Now for my site, I have grouped all of my content into two main categories here. This is my list that I have been working on throughout this series, and I have my brands that are going to be my product pages. And then I have my info, which is more my informational-based articles. If you happen to have more than two category groupings here, though, you would have more than two intros. So however many categories you end up having on your site, that's how many different intro sections you would want to be creating on your homepage. For each of these intro sections, you're going to need a title. You can see right here, I have a little header going with each of these sections that is my title. And then you're also going to need a description. The description should really be a summary of that entire section, and also maybe a little bit of a teaser and a call to action. You want people to have a reason to click on it. And so this kind of helps if you get a little specific, at least briefly mention a few specific things that you have going on in this category. So people that are interested in that information, if they see this being talked about, they will quickly go and take a look at that section of your site. Now you also want to have a picture to go along with each of these main categories. Now the picture that you use is not crazy important. You don't have to go all out. You don't have to hire somebody to get these pictures created for you. If you have some of these products yourself, or can take pictures of maybe not just the products, but maybe the products in use, these can certainly be great pictures to use for the homepage. Something that essentially will kind of summarize what the whole category is about with a single picture. So for solid state drive brands, I'll put up something like a picture of a solid state drive. For the one where I'm going to be talking about solid state drives and what they are and how they can help speed up computers in a variety of different situations, my initial thoughts were to show the internals of a solid state drive there. Because I'm going to kind of be getting into essentially talking about the internals of it all in there. So These pictures can come from a wide variety of different places. You can go out to Google and search for pictures that are already out there. They have settings on Google where if I were to search for solid state drive, for example, and I then go to images, initially all the images that are being shown to me could potentially be free to use, or they might be copyrighted images. Now, 99 times out of 100, if you just randomly choose a picture here, chances are you're not going to run into any issues. You're never going to hear from these sites saying, hey, you're using my picture, I want you to take it down. But if that kind of thing were to happen, that's honestly exactly what they would do. They would try to contact you and just say, hey, this is my picture. We own the rights to this. Please remove it from your site. You respond back saying, no problem. We've removed it down. You've sent a link back to your site showing that it's gone. I have randomly pulled pictures off of here before. And from doing this kind of stuff, building websites in general for give or take 2 decades now, I've never once received any kind of a contact about anything of that nature. However, with that said, if you want to be absolutely sure and just not even possibly worry about that kind of thing, you do have options over here. In the little gearbox, if you click this icon, you have advanced search options. And one of these options all the way down at the bottom is usage rights. You can actually change this to a variety of different options. Free to use or share, even commercially. Free to use or share or modify, even commercially. These two are really the ones that you would want to go for. If you're planning on just reusing it as it is, this one works. If you want to make changes to the image and then reuse it, however you see fit, this would be the one you want. So just as an example, if I change this, I get a different set of pictures, but give or take on a lot of different subjects that you go out and search, there are still tons of available images, even if you do refine it down and remove the ones that are not specifically labeled for reuse, because that is what these are showing up here. It is possible something could show up here and maybe it's not truly supposed to be here if it gets labeled incorrectly, but that would not be your fault, essentially. You can go into each individual site and look and see if they have any specific legal terminology talking about reuse of their images. Sites like Wikipedia actually allow the reuse of any images that they have there. So you can even go to Wikipedia itself and try to find pictures that you could use on your site. Right here, the top number of images actually look to all be Wikipedia based. This one right here is not, but all the rest of them on the top 2 lines are all Wikipedia or Wikimedia, one of those different types of sites there. So there are tons of images out there, and this is in addition to what you can already find on Amazon. It's also okay to reuse the Amazon images that you find for specific products. So I could go and search for a specific solid state drive and download one of these pictures to use on my site. However, you do want to be sure that you are actually promoting whatever product it is that you decide to reuse. Because that's kind of the one bit of gray area there with using an image off of Amazon. They do allow affiliates to reuse them, but you're supposed to be essentially reusing them as part of your promotional material, not necessarily just freely reusing any images that are available on Amazon. So with that said, if you do go to Amazon and find something you want to use and you know you're going to be promoting this product, you can certainly go and save the image to your own computer. I like to get descriptive with my naming and name it based on the actual product or include relevant keyword phrases in the naming of whatever it is that I'm saving here for my image. So with these images, the final thing that we need to have is a link. And this is actually why we created placeholder pages previously, because we have something to link up to instead of having to essentially build our site backwards. If you don't set up placeholder pages and stuff ahead of time, you pretty much have to create all of your posts, or at least some of your posts first, and then work backward to your category pages, and then work backward to your home page. Well, I like to be able to set it up in a more logical manner, so I simply create the placeholder pages first, and then I go back in and add my content to them. Now, the final thing with my homepage is a section of content on essentially an expanded introduction. However, here I recommend to get specific. Now, you can do what I have here on my page and just do a couple paragraphs worth of content, or you can certainly do a lot more. It just kind of depends on whether or not you are going to be really dependent upon traffic for the primary keyword phrase of your entire site, in which case you would definitely want to have a very heavily built up homepage. 1,000 words, maybe even 2,000 words would certainly be useful for you. However, for my site, a lot of my search traffic I predict will end up coming from my informational keyword phrases that I'm going to target with my info pages. And so I haven't gone too heavily into content for my homepage, but I could certainly expand on my topic even more by getting specific once again, talking about things that are going to have a direct appeal to people that are reading your site. Even if this means covering a number of different topics to try to make sure you're hitting everybody. Separating these topics onto different pages can be a good idea if the topics have kind of too much separation between them. But for something like my homepage here, I can certainly talk about a number of the different subtopics that I might be covering throughout my site and just kind of give a little bit of introductory information here about them. Now for me, on this site, I actually chose to have this content address something that I ended up not targeting in my keyword phrases, simply to include this information on my site still, but to not have to devote an entire page to this topic. And this topic is downloading speeds online. When you're downloading a large file, ultimately the speed of that download is limited by the parts in your computer. You can actually go and buy, if you're in a decent area that has a lot of connection offerings, you can buy a really high-speed internet connection. But then when you go and you test your internet connection, if you try to run speed tests on it, you'll find that you really never get what you pay for as far as the potential speed of your connection there. And part of the reason for that is the hardware of your computer can actually limit your downloading speed. And so the hard drive is not the only piece of hardware that could limit that download speed. However, it is a kind of prime culprit of something that could certainly slow it down. Ultimately, your computer is going to have to be able to write the information to your hard drive to be able to save it. It can try to store some of it into RAM and temporary memory, but ultimately it's going to have to go on the hard drive. And so it needs to be able to write that data quickly. And having a solid state hard drive significantly increases download speed as long as other hardware factors on your computer are correct. For example, if the solid state drive is really the only modern fast piece of hardware on the computer, it might not make that much of an improvement. You would see some improvement, but again, another part of the computer would likely end up bogging it down. So anyways, I talk about how this applies to solid state drives, how it can help people that are worried about this type of thing. So I got specific here. I'm kind of addressing a topic that somebody might even search for that has a direct relation to what my primary keyword phrase is. On the homepage of my site, my primary keyword phrase is actually fastest SSD. You can see it right up here in the first paragraph of my content. I usually do try to include my primary keyword phrase in the first paragraph. But then the rest of my content is meant to back that up. So even though I might not still be talking about specifically the fastest solid state hard drive, when I talk about something here, fastest internet download speeds, I'm using phrases that I know are going to be semantic to my primary topic. And so ultimately, all this content will help to back up my primary subject. So with that said, I'm now going to go ahead and add my homepage onto my website. I simply go into Pages and edit my existing placeholder page. You'll know you're on the right one because it'll say up in the permit link that it's just pointing to the domain. There's no actual page address for your homepage once you set that up in WordPress. So I want to take my text content and copy it into my page so I can then begin to work on it. I want to point out a couple of things though. Number one, the way I initially did this, if you see here the formatting that's taking place, the fact that I'm getting a blank line in between each one here, this is actually happening because of Notepad. And this is likely something that you'll run into if you do use something like Notepad, because in order to be able to see all of the text that you're writing, you're likely going to have word wrap turned on. Well, when you copy and paste content using word wrap, it actually changes the way it gets put into your final page here. Just to show you what I'm talking about, I've disabled word wrap now, and I'm going to paste back in one more time. You can see how it still wraps just like it was doing before, except the spacing and the formatting of everything is more in line with what I have in my original here. Stuff like that drove me crazy early on using WordPress, so I wanted to be sure to point that out to you. So now, once I have my content into my homepage, my next step is to connect this homepage with my category pages. My category pages are represented by these two sections of content here. One of them for my informational category and the other one for my product or brand category. So what I want to do is to actually add links and images to these two different sections here. So to start with, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple images. I just simply go to Add Media within the WordPress editor. I select Upload Files, and then I can actually choose the pictures that I want to upload. You can do more than one of them at a time and upload them all together. Now, as far as inserting them, wherever you have your cursor in the editor is where those images will get put into your content. So if you don't want to have to worry about copying and moving code around and stuff like that, click in front of one of your headers here. Add your image in. This could either be something you're uploading right now or something you previously uploaded. Then click on your image. Down below here, we have two main things that we want to pay attention to. We have the alignment. For my site, I'm going to leave this set on left alignment. I think this works best and looks the best with this particular arrangement that I'm going to be doing here. And then down below where it says link to, I want to change this from media file to custom URL. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because normally when you insert an image into WordPress like this, you're only going to be showing a thumbnail of that image. You can see what the size of that thumbnail will end up being right here. Well, when somebody clicks on that thumbnail, with the default setting of media file, they will be taken to see the full size of that image. Well, on my site, for this particular setup, I want these images to point to a category page instead of the full-size image. So that's why I need to provide a custom URL in. Now the actual URL that I provide is going to be for my category pages. These are the actual pages that I am creating for them, not the post categories. So these are my custom category pages that I have redirected from the default category system in WordPress. So I want the full URL of these pages right here. If you hover over the view link on these pages, you can actually simply copy the link location straight from there. And then so for this one here, faster PCs, I can click on Add Media. I select the image that I want to be using. I have it on left alignment. And for the custom URL, I simply just paste in that link that I just copied. Then I can insert it into my page. So now I'm going to do the same thing again with the second image. This one here is pointing to my brands category, and I will again insert that into my page. Now, one of the things that I like to modify about these images, I tried to avoid this kind of stuff as much as I possibly could. Technically, you could ignore this one tiny little step here if the coding is confusing, but actually tried to completely ignore coding in this training series to make it really easy to apply no matter what your experience level might be, but to still have it just as powerful as any other methods that I've ever used to create websites. So this one minor adjustment here is found in the image code. Look for the words WP image, and it's going to have a number out on the end of it. Just simply delete that phrase and the extra space that goes with it. This will be on any image that you insert from WordPress. What this is doing, I'll leave one of these on real quick just so you can see. Doesn't want to let me preview that for some reason. What's going on here is that it's not showing up. It generally adds a border to the image. I know it does it with Weaver Extreme. I've even done some tests on this exact website and have seen it. Anyways, for some reason it's not showing up on this one. But when you have this little WP image with the number as part of the class code here, this actually adds a border around the image. And a lot of times I'll simply be looking to just add the clean image to my page without the border around it. So if you do see the border and you want to get rid of it, this is what you're looking for. Simply delete that little part of text. However, at least with this particular example, it's not affecting that image for some reason. So you might be able to leave it in place, or you might not. Regardless, it's still worth pointing out because the borders on those images was another thing that kind of drove me crazy early on when it just maybe didn't fit with the design that I was trying to go for. Now the next thing that I want to do is to turn these two sections right here into more of a clickable area. Currently, only my image is clickable, where if I click on the image, I'm taken to that subsection of my website. Well, I want this to stand out a little bit more and want it to be more obvious that people can indeed be clicking here to proceed on to another section of my website. One of the ways that I accomplish this is by simply changing how some of this text ends up getting displayed. In particular, the little header title that you have to go along with each of these sections. So you can see the border showing up here. It might just be my sub-theme that I picked perhaps in Weaver that prevents the borders from showing. Anyways, you select a header here for one of your sections, and then if you go up to paragraph, you can change these to a number of different settings to get various sizes. I find header 2 to work out pretty good for this one. However, if you have your text set up kind of how I have mine set up initially, where the header is one line directly above the text like this, you get the entire next paragraph sometimes being put into that header as well. One of the things that you can do to avoid this is to simply add a blank line before switching that header over. However, if you have already done it on accident like this, you can then add your blank line, select all the bold text that's not supposed to be the header, and just change it back to a standard paragraph, and it'll bump that up in line. So now I'm getting a little closer to what I am trying to go for here, but I'm still not quite there yet. I need to add in a couple of links now. Number one, I want the header to be a link. And again, this is going to be pointing to the same place that we have our image pointing to. So if you select your header text and click on the Insert Edit Link button, you can then link up to other content. And if need be, you can actually go down below here, find that content, and easily add your link on. So you want to do the same thing for both of your header titles. I just realized I picked the wrong link for this one. So now we have a little more closer to what I'm going for. image, I have a larger header title that definitely stands out more. And then both the image and the header title are now clickable for me. Now, one thing that is kind of optional to do is to add on an additional text link to the very end of it, where you can say something like read more, although I kind of feel like read more, continue reading, things like that are kind of a little more geared towards single articles as opposed to entire sections of a website. So I might do something like read all info about SSD speed, or click to learn about solid state drives. For this section, I could say something like find out about our recommended SSD brands. And then I can actually turn these extra sections of text into clickable links yet again. So I then end up with an image, a title, and some text down at the bottom of my paragraph to help direct people along to these different areas of my site. Now, beyond this initial setup for these main categories, other things that I might be doing would be like the remaining headers that I have throughout my content, especially down below. I might simply set these with bold text, where I select the text and just click on the bold button right here. And this just helps for the headers to kind of stand out from the rest of my page content a little bit more. So once you get to this point, you kind of realize, okay, this is now talking about a different subject and doesn't really go along with one of these two sections here. Now, a couple of things worth pointing out. You may notice here how on one of these categories, I have text that actually runs out past the side of my image down below it here. But on the other one, I don't have that happening. The reason why is simply the amount of text compared to the size of the image. This image is actually a little bit larger than this one, and the thumbnail ends up being, I think this one's 300 pixels tall as opposed to maybe 200 pixels on this one. So the image itself is not taking up as much space. If you're really picky about something like this, maybe you don't want to see this extra text hanging off to the left here, you can simply find an image that would take up a larger height, or you can reduce the amount of text that you are using here. If I were to simply shorten this by essentially this much text right here, it would all fit next to that image without this bit of overflow. Now, there are some more complicated ways you could say of actually trying to get this work. You can use CSS, for example, to go into an image and actually modify it to have it give some extra padding. For example, on this one, where the image is being displayed. If I go right after it and type style equal to margin bottom, we'll say 40 pixels. If I were to add in something like this, I should end up with more of a clearance down on the bottom of my image. Yeah, that got rid of one line for me, so I'd have to go a little bit larger than that. If I went 60 or 80 pixels, then I'd end up clearing all this out and it would all fit correctly here. And I just have a little bit of white space left in the bottom. So if you do have a little bit of CSS knowledge and you can, add in some simple coding like that to try to correct that issue, that is one way you can go about it. This bit of style code right here. If not, though, if you're completely uncomfortable with the coding and you want to avoid it altogether, simply pick a larger picture or reduce the amount of text content that you have to be associated with that picture. Now, beyond the tidying up of this page and getting the content to look a little bit better, the other main thing that you have for each page are the settings that WordPress allows you to input for the page. This can kind of vary depending on the themes or the plugins that you're using. However, if you do use the exact same software setup that I use, you'll have things like Weaver options down here where you can kind of fine-tune specific elements of a page. I have a lot of these things already being hidden based on my theme settings that I had set up last week. Stuff like the info bar, I'm already hiding, so I don't have to hide them on individual pages. Other stuff like sidebars, if I wanted a sidebar on a particular page of my site, I can enable it right here. Or maybe if I have sidebars on by default, then here I can go in and disable them on a per page basis if I didn't want them to have sidebars. So certain things down in these options can really be useful for a wide variety of situations. However, there is one section here, the SEO settings, that I would recommend for you to look at no matter what. The SEO settings, in particular the search engine listing section, is really the most important that you want to worry about. You have a title tag and a meta description here. In most cases, I will end up simply copying the title of my page. For this particular page, I'm actually going to add on my domain to the end of it because this is my home page of my site. And then for my meta description, I want to give a summary of what my page is about. The reason why these two are important is because they can affect search rankings. But most importantly, even if they had no weight on your rankings whatsoever, these two things can help to attract people to click on your search listing in the results. So you want this to be appealing to somebody that's reading it at a quick glance on Google. Think about when you go to Google and you search for something. There are certain things, certain topics that might be essentially the same throughout all the different pages, but you have titles on some of those pages and descriptions on some of those pages that are certainly much more appealing, and therefore you're kind of drawn to click on those to kind of find out what they're talking about. So leading people to think that you can answer their questions, but not outright answering it in the description and in the title here by leading them into your website first to essentially get that information is one really great way of doing that. You're kind of leaving a bit to mystery. People like mysteries. They like to figure out what's on the other side of it. And so you can use this to your advantage when you are writing out your title tags and your meta descriptions. This can also apply for the titles that you're creating for the actual pages as well. I kind of briefly talked about that last week when we were setting up these placeholder pages where I'll try to include my primary keyword phrase, at least somewhere in the title. It does not always have to be at the beginning. But then my description is going to elaborate on that. And as you can see, even in my title, I have much more than just my primary keyword phrase. I have other descriptive words that go along with it to emphasize on it, to help to possibly make my search listing more appealing for people to click on. So for my description for this homepage here, I'll say something like, browse my personal recommendations for solid state drives for consumers. Based on my own experiences and usage. So I'm re-emphasizing what my main topic is about. I can maybe even say quick or something like that, fast here, where I'm using the same kind of terminology for what my primary keyword phrase is. Fastest SSD. Quick solid state drives essentially means the same thing, but it's in completely different words. Stuff like that, this is what I consider to be at least one example of a semantic word. It can also be a synonym for your keyword phrase. All this kind of stuff is useful when it works in your description and helps to re-emphasize your keyword targeting for your pages. So this is something that I make sure that I do on all of my pages. At the very least, setting a title tag and a meta description. You can then provide that same information on the social networks listing page, especially if you end up using some kind of Facebook sharing tool where people can share a post. It'll automatically populate those shared posts with this information. Or if somebody tries to link up to my website on Facebook themselves manually, it will automatically populate with this information here. So yet another reason to be providing this. It can not only help you get people off of search engines, it can help you get people off of social networks as well. So now that I am finished with my content, setting up my initial settings, I can go ahead and update this page now. So now I have the home page of my site where people can advance on to different subsections of my site as well by simply clicking on the image or the title. However, these additional sections have nothing on them so far. So these are actually my next steps, the category pages and also the About page.